So next week we have Lindsay Vago joining us. She's a member of the second cohort, and she is going to be presenting on how she's used her skills that she's acquired via Ideal in her classrooms. And she was one of the people who presented to the Board of Trustees. So she's got a whole lot of great information to impart on you next week. But this week we are going to have a discussion of how to assess digital assignments, because I think that's been one of the things that people have been wondering about, is if you start incorporating Spark, Sway, whatever, how are you going to assess them? Because you're used to assessing papers and things like that, but how do you assess digital assignments? And as you know, the Ideal Steering Committee has been working on creating a rubric that will go along with the digital literacy learning outcome. And that's part of what Frank is going to talk about today. We're hoping to have Rob Anzalone join us, but he is occupied taking his wife to get a COVID vaccination. So I said, that's a pretty good excuse. We'll let you do that, Rob. So anyway, but Frank is obviously very well versed in this as well. So take it away, Frank.
Thank you. So I'll begin by saying that I think a lot of you have probably done some element of digital literacy that is in the rubric. You just haven't thought of it that way. So for some of you, really, if you really reflect on it, it's just a matter of conceptualizing your work as digital literacy as defined by the rows we have. And for others, it'll mean creating new assignments or adding a little dimension or a little element to an assignment to hit on the rows of the rubric. So try to think about that as I'm talking about like what you might be doing that may be advancing digital literacy already. Okay, and I'm going to try and leave plenty of time to discuss this. And I'll just do a rather abbreviated run through of how I would use the rubric to assess some of the work that I've assigned my students. Keep in mind that this work that I've assigned my students, I didn't really have, though I had a very strong concept of digital literacy, I didn't have this specific rubric. So what I'm going to do is I'll just show you something, and let me put something in the chat first. So what you could do is you can go online chat, and you can look this up. You can copy and paste it into a browser. All right. And that's a Facebook page I created. And this is one of the ways in which I have students share their work online. So they create some things that are already online on their own, freestanding. And we just try to find ways to share our work publicly as much as possible. I'm sorry, I didn't know my phone was on. Okay. So, pardon me. So you can go there. If you look that up, no, it's not clickable. You can just, what I'm trying to show you so I'm trying to give you a sense, for instance, of what digital citizenship is, the bottom row, and I'll show the rubric to you. But digital citizenship refers to taking part in the digital world responsibly. Okay, so if you put that in there, now, so that's not clickable. You are right about that, not clickable. So if you copy it, all right, and you just open up your browser, and I'm a big DuckDuckGo guy, by the way, so don't use Google much. It's just a matter of just a preference. And you just put that in. Okay? And you'll see that that pops up, and there's not a lot of stuff. That pops up in DuckDuckGo, and it's a Facebook page. And I'm going to actually just open it up in an incognito window because I want you to see that you can see this work without even being on Facebook. All right. So there's our page right here, and that's the work I have listed. Now I'm going to bring up the rubric. And I do see something in the chat. Why DuckDuckGo? Yeah, privacy, doesn't track your browsing history. Also, I find that there's an algorithm in DuckDuckGo that I find is, I mean, every search engine, of course, monetizes things, but I find that there's an algorithm to DuckDuckGo that appears to be, to me, to be a little bit more egalitarian, where you have a greater chance of things showing up without simply boosting it through, you know, through paying to boost it. But yeah, it doesn't track you. I like that. I don't. So that's the big thing, what Katie Beth said. And we've just advanced digital literacy right there, right? I mean, that's sort of an act of responsible digital citizenship. Not to say using Google isn't, but being aware of the differences between these search engines is a part of that, is a part of taking part in our online world responsibly. Thank you. Yes, awesome. Okay. All right, so let me pop open the and all my reminders. Let me get those off. Close Outlook too. All right, so this is the rubric we have right now. Okay. And right now, let me just address this one down here, digital citizenship. So it's about participating I just highlighted parts of it, participating responsibly and respectfully in order to sustain and improve digital communities. So one of the things that I'll have students do with their work is they'll share it on that page, for example, or they'll create an online product that can be found through searches as well. So Paul mentioned Sway, so I'm gonna show you a Sway project, and I'll show you some work that they did, and I'm gonna just use what's on that Facebook page right there, and then I'll address some of the other stuff that's right here. Okay, now this is just one way of doing it. Folks, there are thousands of ways to have students meet these objectives. And now I'm gonna explain, not explain, I'm gonna note something that's very important. My students have never seen this rubric. There's really no reason for them to see it. You could show it to them and have it be a guide, but we didn't even have this rubric when I was assigning the stuff that I'm gonna show you. So you might assign, let's say, a research project, and you might have certain steps in mind. So like one of the things that I do in a research project is we have different exercises where I'll say, okay, I want you to focus on an area of inquiry that you're interested in. Let's get a topic established. Let's look for some sources. Let's do some annotation of our sources, an annotated bibliography. Let's do an outline. These are things that a lot of you are familiar with. This goes across many disciplines here. All right, and then drafting, obviously, and written communication, submitting rough drafts. I do all that kind of stuff. But I'm very intentional in keeping stuff like this in mind. So I might not have had this digital literacy rubric, but I knew in my mind that I wanted them to present themselves to participate in the online world in a particular way that was disciplined, where they would be advancing knowledge. I wouldn't say that students, like let's say in a 200 level class, are advancing knowledge is so much advancing, I'd rather call it advancing understanding of a particular subject or topic. All right, so let me go back there to that Facebook page. And let's just click on the one that's up here. Now, what you're going to see that's in here, you can all click on it if you're on it. What I've done is that at the very end, when the students have finished putting everything together, is I share administration of this Facebook page so that they can post the final product there. All right, so they do that. Okay. I edited this and I put down a job well done because they just put it up and they didn't say a job well done. So I put that in there. All right, now I'm not logged in. I'm just going to click on this. This is something they did. Okay. So this was a class that I had in the fall. And it's PO 206, Comparative Politics. And let me just open the chat window too, so I can just see what's there, in case you guys are asking any questions. All right, so that's Comparative Politics Inquiry. This was done on a platform. It's done on software called Sway, Microsoft Sway. We have the premium version because we're an Office 365 campus. And I work with them on how to use this. And they create these research projects. So what they do is they all have individual ones. And then so for instance, one of the things they did, I'll go back to the rubric, is I had them do some curation. So you'll see that in each of their projects, they do some kind of curation and preparation of their digital content. But I also say, I want you as a class to put together a curation of all your work. All right, so what you're seeing is a result of what they did. And then you can ask me more questions. Well, how long did this take? How did you get them to do it? What did you do? I'll just show you right now. So one of the things they did is they did curation in a couple ways. And they picked this out. This is the Indian Parliament, all right, of India, the Lok Sabha of India. And they picked that out. And then these are their projects. Okay, right here. And they put this all together. Now, there's nothing like really brilliant about how they put this together, but it looks nice. They curated it. They used raven colors of maroon and black. And, you know, I would give them some points for creativity, for finding a nice picture online of Lok Sabha, the Indian government. It's one of the largest countries in the world, so why not? They gave some thought to the kind of image they were going to provide. They preferred to use a democratic country, a country with a democratically elected legislature and chambers of parliament. And so that's the photo that they chose. I'll also mention that regarding that photo that they chose, I'm going to go back to the rubric, that what they did is they were concerned with usage rights, because I teach them that we should try to get as many images as we can off the Creative Commons when we're doing our work. Pardon me, and I show them how to find Creative Commons images. In fact, what I do is I simply link them to one of our ideal pages. Chris Previtt made up a great list of the best sites to go to for images that are in the Creative Commons. So I give them that. So almost every image you see is from the Creative Commons as well. So they're showing some kind of sensitivity to usage rights. and they're doing some kind of curation of content. I would say that there's some kind of creativity going on here in their concept of what the image should be to introduce the subject as well. And of course, they're using a tool. They're using Microsoft Sway to share their work um, and curate it all. So let me go into some of the individual projects, because what we'll see is, I keep pointing to the screen. You're not looking at the screen. So what we'll see is that in their individual work, they're doing a lot of these things as well. And I'm just going to click on some people. I'm going to give you a sort of a spectrum. Well, I won't say a spectrum, but one work that doesn't meet criteria quite as well as other works do. So I'm going to click on Keegan's work. And he did a thing on how Xi Jinping has changed China. And we've talked about China in class, and comparative politics, where comparative politics is really where we compare nations to draw political lessons from that. And so China and India, they get a lot of pull in comparative politics because about one quarter of the whole world lives in China and India. So it's they're important. Anyhow, so so I like a lot of things that he did here. And I think that he also shows some creativity. So first of all, he introduces an image here. He used this to talk about how China has become like a manufacturing powerhouse in the world and how it projects its power economically. I did give him some criticism on creativity for using 2 pictures of Xi Jinping, but that's all right. I like this because he talks about how golfing is something that he associates with corruption, but that he holds his own golfing outings. And then he talks about the way they attack the coronavirus. He has an image of that. So I would say that what he's done is that he's been creative in his presentation of work. I think he's curated things well. He has a nice readable works cited page here. You can go to any of these kind of links and look up all of his sources for his work. He also gives sources for his images, and even though they are Creative Commons, it's always good. That doesn't mean that you don't cite your work anyway. You should. It just means what they learn is that Creative Commons images are people's intellectual property. So it's not like citing sources. You can't just like take an image from the New York Times. They'll learn this. You can't just take an image from the New York Times and say, well, as long as I cite it, I can use it. No, because that is someone's property, right? It's like if they, it's like someone, I just want to walk into your house, Frank Cohen, so I could use your bathroom. I'm like, well, that's my property. You cannot just do that. All right. And I try to tell them that images are property. And so authors of images intend them to be used a certain way. And if they're in the Creative Commons, then you're allowed to use them for your own work, but you should still give credit where credit's due. So he does that. It's all, very nicely laid out, and it's very engaging. These aren't like real large projects or anything like that. It's just a way to give us some information. You can look at them more in depth. And so if I were to take a look, at the rubric, I would say that, I'm not going to get into the exceeds area, but I would say that Keegan, he goes by, doesn't go by Keegan. Now I'm forgetting what name he goes by. Alex. I think it is. Why am I forgetting now? But anyhow, we'll call him Keegan. And so what I would say is that I think that he's done an adequate job in preparing his digital content. I think you can find his work online and it's shared. And I think that he is, participating responsibly and respectfully in order to sustain and improve digital communities. I think he's added something of value. and that he shows that he's skilled in this area. I'll just go to a couple others. So here's this one I like a lot. This was Marissa Morency. I don't really want to comment too much. So, I mean, realize I mean, this work, they know it's public. So, I mean, the students know that. And I wouldn't force anyone to make their work public. So if someone says, look, I don't want it out there, I'm like, well, okay, if you give me some good, but most of them don't mind. Oh, and I just realized that's one of the students' faults for spelling Justin's name wrong. But anyhow, this student here, she did a very nice job on this, on blasphemy laws in Pakistan. And I like that, of course, using the Islamic crescent would make sense because blasphemy laws are driven by Sharia. Blasphemy laws have been used to persecute, as she explains. This is just a background for her author card and Sway, but they've been used to persecute religious minorities in Pakistan. She has some images there. This is a woman that's been put on trial for blasphemy. And this is the effort of the European Union to get involved in protecting human rights. This was a lawyer who was assassinated for because he defended. What did Celine to? Oh yeah, you can read it if you want to see that. They all. So what I also like is I like her green background because green is the color. It's a national color in Pakistan, and as part of the Islamic Republic of Pakistan, green is a nationalist color and also an Islamic color as well. So she purposely chose green to be the backdrop of her work. And I'll click on another one too. So this one I'm not, I don't find to be, now Lenny is a guy who I gave good marks because of his content. So I wasn't using this rubric because there were other things I needed them to do that I was looking for them to do in terms of political science theory and concepts. But Lenny might not really make it for, in terms of, let's say, creativity, unlike those other two students, I would say that he would be someone that does not meet the criteria for creativity. For one thing is, these are blurry pictures, all right? And another thing is he has a lot of pictures of Putin here. And I think there's a lot of other stuff he could have done. Putin again, Trump, but so it wasn't really very, and this photo, I told him I didn't really find how it was really relevant to it all either. So I would also say that his curation of content could have been a lot more careful. You could see the difference. It's just, he doesn't even, like the works cited's here, it says that, and then this is here, and he has not cited everywhere where he got his images, and it's not really, you can just tell, it just doesn't meet those criteria as well. But we can assess it using the rubric. Then I had a period of time in class where I said, okay, I need you guys to take responsibility of putting all your work together and to represent what the class has done for the semester, at least in this one area of our study. And then I'm going to make one of you the administrator, a temporary administrator of my Facebook page, and you're going to post it when it's done. And so for the curation, that part of curation, well, I'll tell you what I do. I spend one class where I have them working on it and I share. So they could do a lot of things for curating. So they could use Google websites. What they did was they just created one big sway. And they put everyone's work in one big sway. And they had to tinker with this a bit. Because one of the things they could have done was they could have embedded their projects in the sway, and then you can have them all show up where you actually see little images of their projects. But one of the things we found out, I knew it was going to happen, is that when you do the embed function in Sway, the Sway takes a lot longer to open up and it moves a lot more slowly. So then I asked them, well, what can we do so that this doesn't take so long to open up? You know, people can just point and click. Another thing I ask them to do is I'll say, please share, once you put it on Facebook, if you could share it with friends and family, that would be great. And we'll sometimes get clicks. And some people will end up joining Franklin Pierce University. I think we have about, it says here, we got 221 followers. And that's just been mostly from either students that have joined, a lot of students don't, or it's really, I notice it's parents that join. I think it's parents or siblings, it's people with the same last names as the students who I think are sort of proud of what they're seeing. And so they join it and they'll click like on things. And there's someone here that made a comment who I don't even, someone made a comment here. Oh, maybe you can't see it unless it's, unless you're logged in. But you see there's 8 shares. So someone, I'm not signing in right now, 8 shares. So you can see that people were sharing it, students shared it. And so they're getting them out, they're getting themselves out there, and they're representing themselves in a very, what I would say, a responsible way. And I think what I'm going to do is, how about yeah, Marissa is terrific. Yeah, she's one of yours, isn't she, Jen?
She is mine. I'm sorry,
yeah.
It took me a minute to unmute. She's mine.
Yeah, outstanding. So what I would say is that having them do some of this stuff collectively, I feel like I'm having them meet at least the, I think I'm, in a couple ways, I'm having them meet curation and the preparation of digital content. I'm deepening their curation skills by having them work together on it. You know, I think that in terms of creativity, most of them do meet the criteria. You can look through them and they're participating responsibly and they're showing a working knowledge of these things. So what I'm going to do is it's 4:30. So let me just sort of open this up for questions or any thoughts that you have about work that you've had your students doing that, you know, might meet these things as well.
I was wondering, and you can, you know, answer me offline, but can my intelligence analysis students post stuff to this, or like, could we talk about maybe, I mean, because they're intelligence and security studies, so does that count? Sorry, I don't want to hog in on your project.
Not hogging in. I opened it up to you.
Okay.
So what are you saying, intelligence and security study students?
Mm-hmm. Well, in intelligence analysis students this semester, like if they have good work, could I tell them they should publish it here or print, you know, share it here?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you.
Frank, I have a couple issues and one might be a little sensitive. In the first place, so this all this work is public. Is there any curation on your part, like to say this is not suitable about being posted, like from Franklin Pierce as a public?
No. So I got permission in that page on Facebook. So if you'll see it's formally associated with the university, and when you do something like that on Facebook, because I wanted it formally to come up in searches, they call a number. I gave them a number to talk to. I can't remember because I did that a few years ago. It might have been someone in marketing or public relations. And so they do that. And then they'll say, your page has been approved as a Franklin Pierce University page.
From public relations?
Yeah, whoever I had them call, I gave them a number. You'll see if you set up something like, so you don't have to, but I didn't get any objections from anybody. In fact, I think one time the Franklin Pierce University Facebook shared one of these things like a year ago directly from my page. Oh, I asked him to, but
My other concern, and maybe it's not a concern because these are public pages. And this
no,
is
your concerns are valid. How we use the university name is a valid concern.
well, this is not the same concern. So this might be a little bit off topic. I'm slightly concerned, and maybe people can alleviate that concern that we're using particular names, and other faculty are coming in and saying that's a great student, blah blah blah, because everyone has different responsibility, different relationships with students, different experiences with students, and this is being recorded. And now we have that some student didn't do so well, and some student.
Yeah, but I didn't mean for that to be public. But I'm only telling you that because I'm trying to demonstrate in the rubric. So I would like the person who puts in 3 pictures of Putin, or it might have been 4, right? I mean, I'm just saying, look, that doesn't meet. So if I have to check a box, I'm going to say not me. Plus, they were very blurry images, and plus, he didn't make it clear they all came from Creative Commons. So I had some trouble. Plus, it plainly, you saw it. It's not, I'm trying to give you a contrast. Now, this is not made to be public. So, I don't want people to see it. But the students, part of digital citizenship is putting your best face out there into the online community, and not just doing something on TikTok where you're being like very revealing and sexually overt and all that kind of stuff. So,
Frank, but there's a couple of questions that have popped up in
Yeah.
the chat.
yeah, I see them.
Okay.
Yeah, how much class time do you take to write? I get that one. Yeah, absolutely. Rude. Oh, that's the easy one. Yeah. I asked them for their permission. I mean, they know it's public. I say, if you have any objections, you let me know. So I have another tool that I use called Flipgrid, and that one's a little bit more sensitive because that's where students are looking into a camera and speaking. And it is publicly accessible, and they'll say, do you mind? I'm not on social media at all. So could you please not show mine? And so you can hide things. So I hide theirs when people ask. And yeah, and if they don't want it on there, I'm not gonna put it on there. What's important to me is that they understand the process of representing yourself online. The class time, yeah, it takes some. I would say that altogether, I try to record some videos. I use Screencast-O-Matic to record some instructional videos to save some class time. But I would say that I would have to use about 100 minutes of class time. 100. It depends on how difficult things are. I mean, my upper level class, I sometimes try to have them do something that's a little bit more complex and put together a website, and I expect a little more in terms of the way they curate things. So I might have to take up more time in class because, not that I want to be a micromanager, but you get free riders, you get folks that are not really helping as much. I want them all involved in the process. You got other folks who will mess it up and stuff like that as well. So yeah, you do have to forsake some of your discipline content, I would say, in class, but you can make up for that in other ways. You could do things on video. You could have more asynchronous stuff to have them go through lessons. But I would say anywhere from 100 to 150 minutes altogether of my semester class session times.
I think too that as semesters roll by, students will be more and more familiar with these tools from having used them in other courses, and you won't need to devote as much time. When I had my students, they could choose between Spark or Sway, or I gave them the option of writing a traditional paper, and most of them already knew how to use either Spark or Sway and didn't need any outside instruction in the use. I did offer sessions individually to students, but most of them were fine. As a matter of fact, I did a pre-class survey to see how many of them were already familiar with Spark or Sway because I was planning to use them for an assignment. So that's another tactic that you can use, is the pre-course survey to find out how many are already familiar with the tools that you plan to use.
Most of your students knew, huh?
Yeah.
This is not the only,
They knew one or the other. Not many of them knew both Spark or Sway, but I gave them the option to use one or the other, so that met it.
now, there's other things you could do. The rubric's just a concept. It's all in how you apply it, right? We all have concepts in our field, right? And people can apply them in various ways. I mean, you could do things on Canvas that would be like digital citizenship. For instance, you could have students, I haven't used this function a lot, but you could have students, for instance, form their own groups in Canvas for a particular purpose and try to somehow impart understanding of content to one another by creating their own discussion threads or lesson plans or whatever. I mean, there's a lot of collaborative things. You could use Microsoft Teams. You could even use discussion threads in Canvas if you have it formatted in a particular way where you want so many replies and you get them to learn how to be nice to each other and civil with each other in a discussion thread. That's good practice for being online. You could use YouTube. You could say, well, you can have students post a video on YouTube and say, well, there's certain elements that I want in there. And if you post it and you address these elements of psychology or criminal justice or philosophy or whatever it is, that can be, I mean, there's, like I said, thousands of ways to be able to do this. It's real simple. Like, don't be deceived by all the words in the rubric. It's like, you might even be doing some of this already.
Are there other people in the group who have already begun to assess digital assignments, or that they've heard about from colleagues in their colleges or anything like that you'd like to share experiences?
I don't know if I want to share my experience more than to ask a question. So, I mean, I've done it, but what's happened to me is, I don't know, what happens to me pretty much every time. I think I've thought through what the grading rubric will be, and then I actually go to grade it, and I'm like, that was a bad grading rubric. And then I feel like I can't grade them because I didn't tell them ahead of time that I was looking for these certain things. So my question to Frank is like, well, what are you telling them about, how you're grading them in terms of, do you have a rubric you could share? And, when you're saying you're going to be graded on creativity and aesthetics and curation and.
Well, so I have a way of addressing that without giving them this rubric. So
It doesn't have to be that rubric, but yeah.
No. So I have like an assignment. Part of the assignment is just focused on the images. All right. So I'm like, find images and we'll talk about this. So I'll say, like, I'll use an example and I'll say, like, okay, here's a paragraph I wrote. Here's an image that I think will really engage someone with what I've written. And here's an image that I don't think will. All right. So I do that. I do that kind of thing. But most of my rubrics and my assignments, so if I give them bullet points, I'm like, you get 2 points for this, 2 points for that, 2 points for this. All right. A lot of that pertains to political science content. And some of it is the technical aspects of what I would call digital literacy, but they never even need to see that rubric because I'm trying to integrate it into the instructions of the assignment. So it hasn't changed a lot. So if I say I want to see an outline of your work, or an outline itself is not digital literacy, but it does allow them to have a better product to show people later on. So I never say, well, Sway's digital literacy. Putting this together is curation. I am not telling them that. What I will say is I said, okay, here's our final collaboration. That's what it's called, the final collaboration. I didn't call it curation. Now I'm going to call it curation. That wasn't in my language as much. And I said, what's the best way that we can all exhibit our work? I mean, you don't have to change your instructions in a lot of assignments as long as you're intentionally trying to hit on these things in digital literacy. You could still keep all your same instructions that you had for them to increase their understanding of environmental science. You know,
Right.
you
I
don't,
have
you
a
don't,
question, Frank. I have a question for the group, which is that kind of like what Catherine was saying is sometimes like I write a rubric and I think I've got stuff. And then when I get the assignments, I think, oh, here are 3 other things I wish I had included. So I wonder if it would be helpful for us, and this is just putting out for the group, to have a session on writing rubrics for digital literacy assignments, so that, because sometimes I see things that either Frank says that he rates, or that especially Chris Previtt, that I'm like, oh, that's really interesting, and that's the language I want to be using.
I
Yeah, we
would,
could totally do that.
I would find that helpful.
That would
Sure.
also be a great topic for the upcoming Center for Teaching and Learning too. You know, to bring in a bigger community. But yeah,
Right.
that
Let
sounds
me,
like a good idea.
let me put up one thing. I didn't plan on doing it, but now that you're mentioning it, you keep talking because I don't know if I'm going to find this right away. So, um, so
Just to jump in while Frank's searching.
yeah,
So, you know, I have pre-built rubrics like everybody else, but just because of what I teach, the majority of mine are visually based. I have some writing rubrics too, but those are probably more standard. And at the beginning of the semester, I will spend a class going over means of assessment. And so I will go through, say, you know, we're using these 3 rubrics for class. Let's put them up on the screen. We'll go through them. I walk them through all the criteria, try to explain what the criteria means, how you can satisfy the criteria. I'll give examples of that. And then all the assignments are pre-built in Canvas in advance, and all the rubrics are already pre-attached. So then I will direct them to the assignments list in Canvas and say, read through all the assignments in advance. Then right below it is the rubric. You can see how the connection works. And then we have a critique system. We go over how that works. And then I will probably repeat that about a third of the way through the semester. I'll be like, hey, remember whenever that means of assessment, like week 1, we're doing it again. Just so that they understand how they're graded. But I also try to use applicable rubrics so that when they are grading each other, they use the same rubric I use to grade them. Well, I shouldn't say grading each other. When they are critiquing each other, they don't give each other grades. They give each other feedback. I have them use the exact same rubric I use to grade them, so that we're all talking the same language all the time. You know, and then at the end of the semester, if it turns out that maybe the rubric could be used better, or I could reword it or whatever, I'll make adjustments. But I pretty much commit to it for the semester and then try to get them on board early with it.
so let me just, so I'll show you what I mean, that you don't have to change things all that much. The only thing that you're going to add in your rubric, in your instructions for them, is the only elements you're going to add to. You can keep all your same rubrics, but you can add an element that is going to lead them to make this digital work. So I'll share this with you. It's a little small. Let me see if I can make this a little bigger here. And then I'll share it. So this is from that comparative politics class. I just go in that syllabus right now. And I think this is all, actually I can share the link to the class with you too. I think you can see most of what I have in there, because in Canvas, I just set it all to public. That doesn't mean you're going to see everything, but you'll be able to see a lot of stuff. So let me just put this in here. I'll put it in the chat first. Okay. So that's the Canvas course right there. And now I'll share. So you guys see this, right? This list of assignments here. Am I sharing my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. All right. I just want to make sure. Okay. Why it look like I'm not? All right. So you see these things: introduction and thesis statement, your first 600 words fully cited with works cited, all of these elements. Now, see what I added? Collect visual aids in a sway. All right. So I'm starting to add the digital elements. Everything else is just sort of normal, like research paper writing. So I'll say collect visual aids and sway, and that was so they get used to using sway and putting images in there. And then we'll get to the final draft. And then we have oral presentation of research. And the only difference there, so if I go, let me find a new oral presentation. So a lot of this stuff doesn't really change much. I think the only thing that, let me go to one other. Wait, let me stop sharing there because there might be something in there you shouldn't see. Hold on. I don't mind sharing, but I do mind sharing some things. Okay. Oh, yeah, here, I'll open this one. Now I'll share. So this is an assignment I gave this semester. Okay, so this is the February 25th class on digital literacy Flipgrid. Oh, and this is a class where I recorded it. We've been recording all our classes on Zoom. And it's how to use Flipgrid. And Flipgrid is this place where, wait. I'll show you the Flipgrid later. But anyhow, so most of the things I have in here, you see how I have things like have good lighting, be well positioned, centered, and seated upright, don't slouch, that kind of stuff. Like in past oral presentation assignments, let's say 10 years ago, well, I wouldn't say have good lighting or don't slouch, because what they would have been doing is they would have been standing in front of the class behind a podium, and they would have probably had up something like a PowerPoint as a visual aid. So that's what I'm saying. Like, that's the way you're adapting your rubric to a digital environment. And I'll just show you what a Flipgrid is real quickly. I didn't want to get into a whole nother assignment, but all right, please hold. All right. So I'll go to Flipgrid. And for that one, again, I can take that rubric, I can easily apply it to this stuff. So I'll just do the political. They all had the same rubric. That was just different content. So this is for a class called political violence. And the way you would see it is like this. Okay, so this is something that anyone can see. These are their responses. And I told them to be creative as well. So this is like a thinking face, which I thought was good. You can put a, I mean, I'm not going to explain how all of Flipgrid works, but I wanted a certain format. And when they make a presentation, like I didn't want, you know, like this or that, you know, I wanted, I told them to have things like have lighting in front of you, not behind you. You know, and that's something that I put in the rubric. Make sure your head's in the center of the camera. So that's what I mean by adapting these things. I told this guy, don't wear a hat again, a cap again in presentation. Because I did mention that. I'm like, look, some folks can't avoid wearing caps. But, you know, I would say things like, you know, don't, stylistic things, try to look presentable. All right. So like 10 years ago, I didn't care about being centered or well lit. Although they were probably already getting lit anyway, but still. Um, but you know what I mean. So you see,
And
Catherine, it's sort of like an organic thing. You're just going to add a few bullets to your rubric that, what in correspondence to whatever that type of digital sharing is.
Shally, do you want to kind of talk more about what you put in the chat?
Instead of the giant paragraph.
I see it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
why don't you
last year we did podcasts for biochemistry. And so Susan DeRuda and I did a podcast in advances, and it was supposed to be an exemplar, but we were actually able to point out things that were good and bad about our podcast. But one of the other things it really did was to help sort of like force me to think really hard about what sort of things I might have forgotten to put in the rubric and what I really wanted to focus on. Kristen Nivius has a form you have to fill out to do the podcasting in advance, and it's got like, what's your title, what's your topic, what's your discussion, what's your synthesis, when are you going to schedule it. And so that actually was something I wouldn't have necessarily thought to do, but it forced them to kind of go down the line and really prepare in a very structured way for their podcast in advance.
Podcasts are awesome projects for advancing digital literacy. I mean, for all the rows of the rubric, they can be really good. And right, so I used a podcast studio for a class once to put together one, and there's a process. And what I did, now this was I did this with the upper level class, is I'm like, you know what, that's part of your project. Be like project manager. Someone could be a project manager, take the lead. You set up everything with Kristen Nevius's GAs. You figure out how to do it and get back to me in 3 days. And that's part of your assignment. And you give them some points for that. And that's part of the work. Is that political science? No, it's not. It's digital literacy. It's skills. So, and I only figured that out, Shally, because a lot of this stuff is trial and error. So the first time, like, oh, I didn't realize it was so hard to get everything. It's not that hard, really. You just learn by doing. And then I said, oh, I don't want to do this. You guys do it. And you figure out how to get music that you can use for your intro and your outro. And then, in the middle, they take a little break and they have a little public service announcement on something.
Yeah, the Fitzwater Center is great to work with in general. And while we're talking about the Fitzwater Center, I'm happy to announce that we're spending a lot of money out of the ideal funds to buy new equipment, both updated equipment and new kinds of equipment for the Fitzwater Center. And we heavily encourage you to make use of that next year. The equipment is being ordered even as we speak. And it'll be in place for next fall. So we're continuing to partner with the Fitzwater Center greatly and having more and more equipment available. So keep that in mind.
And specifically, we're talking equipment that students will be able to check out and use in projects. So better quality recording items, better quality cameras, so if you want them to go do a photography project for like an ecology class or something, I know nothing about nature, I'm making this up, but you get the idea. They can go get a nice quality camera, go out into the woods. So, they'll be able to do something beyond what the capabilities of their phone is. And it also sort of helps level the playing field for students who don't necessarily have nice equipment on their own. They can now get nice equipment through the Fitzwater Center.
The Fitz is awesome. I mean, we've used the studio to hold the way we do some things in our upper level classes. We do these simulations, so like mock exercises. So I had them do their research in the context. Long story short, it was a model World Bank conference, a meeting with the World Bank on how to foster development in particular countries. And we used the studio, and you'll find it. Go to the Facebook page. It's all there. It's all shared. It's all online. There are some podcasts, and there are some studio productions of our moot courts and other things like that. And they'll do it. And the first couple of times I sort of micromanage because, you got to do some of it. But if it's an upper level class, let them, you assign them responsibilities, and that, just count that as part of the work.
All right, well, we're just about out of time for today, but I'd like to thank Frank for stepping in. Again, we were hoping to have Rob Anzalone do this, and Frank very graciously agreed to do this. And as you just saw, he did an amazing job. And I hope this has helped you get some ideas about how you can assess some of the digital literacy assignments that you create moving forward. So next week, we will have Lindsay Vago share her experiences. And then the week after that, we're going to have a very interesting guest speaker talking about deep fakes, which will blow you away. Some of you probably know about something about deep fakes already, but this speaker is amazing. I saw him at EDUCAUSE. So anyway, thank you very much as always, and we shall see you next week.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Paul.
Frank. That was great.
Oh,
Yep.
Paul,
Yes.
so my vaccine is next week at 5:05 up in Keene. I'll put my phone on. I just don't know what kind of reception I'll get on Cliff Road. So
Don't worry about it.
Okay.
Obviously, that's more important than any of this stuff. Helene, earlier you had expressed some concerns about just like being able to log into some of these tools that we're showing. Has that improved?
I know. I haven't gotten into much, but I'm going to have my my AMP lab. If instead of a quiz, I'm going to have them do Canva and do an infographic and then have it downloaded onto Canvas. So let's see how that works out. And
Right. No, that's the whole point. Just start small. I mean, I think we tend to get intimidated because we see some of these people who are very experienced with these things. And, we're like,
Yeah.
oh my God, I could never do that. Or what should I do first? Yeah, that's a perfect example. Start with something small and then just build from there. That's
what I'm going to
exactly.
do. I asked Lynn, I said, do you mind if I use the class, to get something? And so I'm going to try two. I'm going to try to have them, do it on Canva and maybe post it on Padlet
Mhm.
and go from there. So
Sure.
just those two I'm going to start with.
No,
Yeah.
that's
But
perfect.
thank you. If I have any problems, I'll let you know. Okay.
All righty. Okay. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much. Have a good weekend.
You too.
Bye.
Melinda, I see you're still on. Is that intentional, or perhaps you're just have stepped away? Okay. All right.